What's up, ladies and gentlemen? We are live and back and better than ever. This is Boilers in the Stands. Quick turnaround after a big win against Ohio State, and they followed the Purdue Boilermakers follow it up with a dominating second half against the Penn State Nittany Lions in a hostile environment at a unique court, and we're going to get all into it. I am your host, Greg Braggs Jr., as always. Alongside me is my co-host, Kraig Bowers. And for what we do on these post-game shows in spaces, whether we're live here or we're in Joe and Aidan spaces, underneath me is Joe Jackson and Aidan Kunst from the Feed the Post podcast. You can find them across all platforms where you can find your podcast available, and they're on Twitter, and we'll get into all that stuff of where you can find them if you didn't watch our first post-game show where we went live. So we're going to dig right into it here tonight. Boilers were down 6 at the half, and then in the second half, a complete domination of Penn State. Braden Smith just doing everything he can in the pick and roll game to find Zach Edey. Guys, finding life beyond the arc. Fletcher Lawyer once again catches fire in the second half. Guys just making big plays all over the place. Excited to hear all your thoughts. Kraig, I'm going to start it out with you. What was your instant reaction to that game?
Well, I think coming into the game, and one of the things I talked about before the game was one of the things that scares you about Penn State is they have a lot of guys that can just hit tough shots. They got guards and wings that can back you down. They can hit fadeaways. They got three-point shooters. I'm pretty sure they're the best three-point shooting team in the Big Ten Conference. They just got ballers, and that worries you. And then on the flip side of that, we have Zach Edey that's 7'4", and Penn State's going to play 5 out, and they're going to try to move Zach around a bunch, and it was just going to be a testament of will and who won out. In that first half, Penn State hit a lot of really tough shots, and you thought, okay, I don't think they can keep making these. But you never know with that set of guards that they have, and eventually they quit going. And then Braden Smith, I call him the puppet master. I am like trumpeting that nickname because he just pulls the strings of opposing defense. And I don't know if they show him film at halftime or what exactly they do, but every time he comes out, except the Rutgers game maybe, he seems to like, okay, I've got it figured out now, and then I'm just going to, play with a toy on a string. And he just completely manipulated that defense. We switched Morton over onto Pickett, and he primarily shut him down the second half. And that was it. We asserted our will better. And then Fletcher Lawyer and a couple other guys stepped up and knocked down some threes in the second half, which really wasn't happening in the first half. So when you add all that in, there's not a lot of people that can beat us.
No, I mean, they certainly have the cheat code, the gravitational pull that is Zach Edey. It's kind of pick your poison. And to see Braden Smith kind of have like a enlightened moment, like, hey, I can just keep doing this and they're not going to be able to stop it, was pretty damn impressive. Joe, I'm going to go to you next. What was your instant reaction to this game?
Yeah. Personally, I've been looking forward to this game so much. I love what Penn State runs. I love what they do. Jalen Pickett's my favorite non-Purdue player to watch in the conference. And just sitting there, I was just so happy just watching this game. Even in the first half when Penn State was hitting everything, Pickett was going crazy. Just really enjoyed watching this. I'm really excited for the rematch in a couple weeks. But looking into more of the basketball side, I think the biggest difference came, one, obviously, is, Kraig said, Edey's just dominant. Can't really stop him when he gets going like that. Smith was amazing in pick and roll, but then also, Pickett was on fire in the first half. Some of it's shot variance, he knocked down some ones that he doesn't usually take. It happens when you have that good of a player. But that second half, I think Purdue really emphasized more in getting through screens, staying in front of Pickett, and it just kind of shut him down. I don't know what he exactly scored. He scored maybe 4 points, or probably more than that I'm remembering, but he did not have the impact in the second half, and I think a lot of it was just because the defensive change at halftime.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just a great adjustment there in the second half, and 2 games in a row now where they've struggled out the gate in the first half, and then the second half kind of assert their will, kind of flex their muscle a little bit. Aidan, your initial instant reaction here to this big time win for Purdue?
Yeah, Joe and I have talked a lot about, as he just said, how much we love watching Penn State play and the great stuff they run, and that's certainly true. I'm as big a Shrewsbury fan as anybody, but I think what Purdue did in this game is really made Penn State boring to watch, I thought. They bogged them down. They didn't let them get out and run. And really, I think Purdue won this game by just making it an app. They just completely took it into their favor in terms of pace of play. They slowed it down. They never let Penn State get out and run. They are most dangerous when Pickett is creating for others. You can let him have his 26, hitting the tough shots that he did today, and I think you'll live with that. And Purdue did. But it's when Funk's getting going, when Dred's getting going, Winter, those guys who are all the spot up shooters in the transition game. That's when Penn State is most dangerous. And I think Purdue won this game by slowing it down, getting into the half court, and executing at a high level. And I think, as Kraig said, that mostly is Braden Smith and Coach Painter just saying, let's just keep doing what works, which was the high ball screen with a weak side lift. And now you saw Jai throw his hands up at points of like, I have to stay in this drop. But here comes Fletcher Lawyer lifting on the weak side of the ball screen. And so now Andrew Funk, who's guarding Lawyer, has to make a decision. Do you go down with Edey, or do you let Smith hit the wide open Fletcher Lawyer? Usually he stayed with Lawyer. It ended up in a bunch of dunks. And I think, as much as Joe, you and I talked a ton about how bad of a matchup this was for Purdue, but I think what really showed is really how bad of a matchup it was for Penn State.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, when a team can't have an answer for Zach Edey like that, and again, he stays out of foul trouble, which is a big key. And we'll get into the details when it comes to the stats and everything else. I'm wearing my Bears gear, as some of you can see. It was a big day for my Chicago Bears. They found their way to the number 1 pick. We did have a question in the chat quickly, Joe. Do you have any Sunday night football bets? Matt says is trying to make some money before the Sunday night game gets rolling between the Lions and the Packers.
Putting me on the spot, not having anything in front of me. We'll go just a random dart. We'll go Aaron Jones first touchdown.
Aaron Jones first touchdown. There you go. Make some money. First post-game show we did the other night, first live post-game show, I should say. We dug into the stats a little deeper. Now that we've gotten our instant reaction, we'll probably get to a point where we talk about individual achievements in this game, because there's certainly a few to highlight. But just to kind of set the table here, I'm going to read off the team statistics for the night just to kind of set the table. As I said, Purdue shoots 55% from the field, Penn State 42% on. And Purdue was 31 of 56, while Penn State was 26 of 62. 62 shots up for Penn State. 44% from the three-point line for Purdue, 8 of 18. And Penn State was 36% from the three-point line, 8 of 22. And I'd be interested to know the splits between the first half and the second half there. 86% from the free throw line for Purdue. Not many free throws shot in this game. 6 of 7 for Purdue, 3 of 3 for Penn State. Only 3 free throws taken for Penn State. 12 turnovers. Once again, turnovers get into double digits for Purdue. That's 3 straight games here this week in the last 7 days. Only 9 turnovers for Penn State. Points off turnovers, 12 for Purdue, 15 for Penn State. Total rebounds, 36 for Purdue on 26 defensive rebounds and 10 offensive rebounds. And for Penn State, 25 total rebounds on 15 defensive rebounds and also 10 offensive rebounds for Penn State. Second chance points, 15 second chance points for Purdue, while only 6 for Penn State. So Purdue taking advantage in that column. Bench points, only 7 for Purdue, 11 bench points for Penn State. Points in the paint, Purdue dominates. No surprise there. 42 points for Purdue to 28 points in the paint for Penn State. Fast break points, 8 points on the fast break for Purdue, only 4 for Penn State. Blocks, 5-1. Purdue in the advantage in the block column. Steals, 5 steals for Purdue, 7 for Penn State. And then assists, 18 for Purdue, 12 for Penn State. And time of our lead changes, there were 4. And lead time, Purdue led this game for 27 and a half minutes, and Penn State only led it for 10 minutes and 26 seconds. So those are some of the stats there. You're the stats guy, Joe. Any of those stand out to you?
Again, the free throw attempts. Last week, I think last game they were at 10, and I was like, I think that's the fewest they've attempted all season. I actually have the stats ready this time. Last game, they put up 10 free throws. That was their fewest all season before this one, where they only put up 7. Before that, it was 17, and that was in the second game against Austin P. Is that Austin P? But I think that's partially just because of how good Edie was. Good to see the three-pointers fall again, 8 for 18. Penn State, definitely, their three-pointers stands out, going 8 for 22. I think they were shooting 50% at half, if I remember correctly. But those are, and then the turnovers again. Purdue had 6 in the first 10-ish minutes, something like that, and then 6 the rest of the way. So those are kind of the 3 things that probably stand out the most as a team to me. Obviously, Edie 30 points is pretty wild, but and then Pickett putting up almost a triple double, but.
Yeah, Aidan running into a little bit of technical difficulties with his Wi-Fi, I'm assuming. So, Kraig, go ahead and anything that stood out to you in the stat column there. We can't hear you.
Muted.
There. Something has happened.
I'm on now. You asked about the halftime splits, and I've got that pulled up. And I think that's what stands out to me. If you look, Penn State shot 20% from 3 in the second half. Penn State finished the game with 9 turnovers, but 7 of them were in the second half. And I think the one thing we haven't hit on yet is Purdue was so much more disruptive on the defensive end in the second half of that game. I think that started with Morton a little bit. I think when Newman came in, he was super disruptive. And even if they weren't getting the steal, there was 3 or 4 times where I thought we had a steal and didn't end up getting it. But we forced them deeper into the shot clock. We forced them into some bad passes and into some difficult shots, although they hit a lot of those in the first half. Just way more disruptive in the second half, and then forced them. I mean, I think a lot of it was us forcing them into a worse 3-point shooting percentage. They still got some open looks they just missed. That's a couple of things. I'd say the other thing, I'd have to go back and look, but what'd you say Smith finished at in assist?
He had 7.
Yeah, 7 assists, and that's not like
most of the season.
That's like not a monster number, but the way Purdue runs its offense normally, that's a monster number for Purdue, because the way we run our system and feed the post generally from the 2 or the 3 spot instead of the point guard spot, it makes it hard for a point guard to just rack up a ton of assists. But you saw Painter, and the Painter has called great games all season long. And the one thing that I think he's done more of this year and a little bit last year than he was willing to do previously was be like, hey, the high ball screen's working. Just let it roll. Put the ball in Braden's hands and say, go make smart decisions. And he obviously trusts him to do that. And I'm looking forward to 3 more years of watching Braden run that high ball screen action, because it's dynamic. And he, like I said, he just pulls the defensive, puppets like they're on strings at times.
Well, and Fletcher Lawyer has such a big key in that, right? The shooters on the outside, because then they have to stay honest to the outside. So it's the collective when it comes to that. Obviously, Braden is the maestro, but Fletcher's responsibility to hold that defender out there, or whoever it is, but typically it's going to be Fletcher they're playing off of, is just as big there. What do you think on that end of it, Aidan?
Yeah, I agree. It's like I said earlier, it's very, very difficult to guard if Fletch is making shots like he did today, because really you can just stick the 2 Braden, Edie, Fletch, and then you could stick the 2 non-guys on the strong side, and you set the high ball screen, and now as Braden's coming off, you've got Edie on the roll and Fletcher lifting behind the ball screen. And again, it just puts Fletcher's defender in conflict, because he has to decide, do I stay out here with this elite shooter? Do I sink in and try and take Edie away? And you may think, well, this was just a Penn State thing. They're so small, and maybe to some degree that's true. But I really think against most teams on our schedule, I mean, the Smith-Edey pick and roll is going to be very, very difficult to defend. There's no real way, if it's that isolated weak side, to help off of a Morton or even a Gillis or a First or anybody like that. It is true 3-man game, and I don't know how teams guard that. I really don't, other than just let Braden shoot the semi-contested floater, which I think teams may decide to start doing, and I think he can make that. So.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if we looked at some of the individual statistics of, Caleb First plays for 20 minutes, gets 7 points on 3 of 3 shooting. I think he just did a good job in the second half of getting in there and getting messy underneath, got some key rebounds. Mason Gillis too. I mean, he only has 5 points in 18 minutes, but there was one possession where he would not be denied underneath, and he kept getting his own offensive rebound. Turned it into an and one. It was a back-breaking play for Penn State. When they have so much to deal with everybody else, Zach, when you have guys like the role players, hitting those daggers on you, that makes it that much harder. But yeah, Zach Edey ends with 30 points on 14 of 21 shooting, 13 rebounds, 3 assists. I mean, it's just unbelievable to watch him go to work. Braden Smith, 15 points on 5 of 11 shooting, 3 of 6 from 3-point land, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, in 33 minutes played. Zach Edey played 36 minutes. And then Fletcher Lawyer, 17 points on 6 of 11 shooting, 4 of 7 from 3, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. Certainly an impressive game from the big trio. And if they can continue to do that, Purdue's going to be in good shape. They got hit in the mouth against Rutgers. And at the end of the day, they only lost, on the last shot of the game. Fletcher Lawyer hit the shot to win it, and they matched it. Good for them. Purdue, they've lost 1 game by 1 at home, and they turn around and win 2 games. First one in a nail biter with some dramatics at the end. And this one, they handled Penn State, who's played very well at home and on the road. They beat the brakes off Illinois on the road.
Yeah, and Braggs, we've seen a renewed focus, especially from Smith. That game was a wake-up call. Like, that Rutgers game was a wake-up call that I think this team needed. They had not been playing that well, and they had a brutal week up ahead, starting with Rutgers, and now these 2 road games. They lose that Rutgers game. Like you said, they get punched in the mouth, especially the freshmen, and Braden has seemed to take that personally. He has come out with a renewed aggression. Obviously, it's been the same with Lawyer. Apart from the Ohio State first half, he was very bad there, but then he turns that around. And I just think the team as a whole looks way more locked in than we would have said a week ago, coming off that 5-game stretch post Portland. I think that was a great thing for Purdue that they lost that game. I really do.
Yeah, and with that said, though, Rutgers ranks 3rd in KenPom defensively. Ohio State's 91st and Penn State is 72nd. So, I agree. But let's see maybe how things go when we face another really, really good defensive team, especially with kind of some longer, super active wings and guards. But yeah, and I think another thing too is since that Rutgers game, Smith has actively sought his own shot more.
Yes.
Before, a lot of times he was almost passive about it. Well, I'll shoot it if I have to, or if I can get all the way to the rim, or I know I can draw a cheap foul off somebody because I got him beat, I'm going to do it. But he seemed to be more active about, I can get to my spot and I can get to the shot and I'm going to do it. And that just makes him that much more dangerous when you have to worry about him shooting, especially when Edey's rolling to the rim. If they're not thinking about, well, if it's a rarity, if Braden takes that shot instead of he's willing to do that consistently, then they have a hard time hedging as much.
Yeah, and they can't go under. Pickett went under the first possession tonight, and Braden just burns him. Steps right into a deep 3. He had a pull-up too. His willingness to shoot in the first half, I think, was a huge part of why Purdue kind of stayed afloat in this game until kind of the water found its level in the second half.
And then if he's aggressive, then you have to focus more on that, and then the pick and roll opens, and Edey gets 4 lobs. And me and Aidan were texting a little bit during the game, and I forget exactly the context, but We'll get you next time. We'll get you next time.
Not good enough for the group chat?
My bad. But I forget the context, but Brain forced a shot up, but it's just like it was one of those that like you live with the forced pull up, honestly, with Smith every once in a while, rather than him, in the Rutgers game when he only put up 3 shots. He put up 11 today, which is his most on the year. He's only gone 10 plus. This is his 3rd game of shooting 10 plus shots, and one of those came against Ohio State too. So, I think we look back to that Rutgers post game. We said it last time. Painter called out Smith, knowing that Smith would take it, and then Smith's responded as amazing as you can, especially coming from a freshman.
And that final dagger by Braden Smith, where he's almost getting fouled, and he's kind of got a little hitch and kicks his leg out and nails it. I mean, that was an impressive display there. Kraig, I'm going to leave this one for you. Sometimes this is more of a back end discussion, but tomorrow there will be the new rankings for, the NCAA men's basketball, and Purdue's sitting at 1 right now. Arizona goes down. A bunch of top 10 teams go down, as you pointed out on Twitter. Where do you stand, when it comes to the 3 1-loss teams in Houston, Kansas, and Purdue? And, where's your assessment on this whole situation?
Yeah, I think we stay 3, just recency bias, and we've had the most recent loss. And there was a few games going into that stretch where, didn't necessarily blow out some teams that maybe, press thought maybe they should have handled a little bit easier. So my guess is they go 3. I don't love that. I think Houston's played 4 total quad 1 games and is 3-1. Kansas is 6-1. If I'm going to objectively look at it, to me, I think at this point, Kansas should be the easy number 1 team with just the amount of quad 1, quad 2 games they've played and won. And how they looked over that stretch. I'd still like to see us at 2. But Houston's probably going to go to 1, it sounds like, and it looks like. And there's a good chance they're not going to lose for quite a while after that. Maybe Memphis coming up before too long. But Houston could sit there a long time just because, we like to kind of bash on Gonzaga and their schedule once they get into conference on this show sometimes. Not the post-game show. I won't speak for Joe and Aidan, but when Bobby's on the regular show. But Houston's going to be in the same boat. They don't have much of a challenge in that conference this year.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter anymore. Having the number 1 spot for as long as they did was a great achievement. Now it's about trying to win the Big Ten. And Joe, we saw a lot of action here the last 2 days in the Big Ten. Where do you stand when you look at, now that the dust has settled here over the weekend? Some teams have jumped, have taken some big hits. Race Thompson takes a knee injury. The injuries keep piling up for IU, and you hate to see that. But at the same time, this is a team that was favored coming into the season to win the Big Ten, and now it looks like it's going to be tough for them. Where do you stand now that the dust is settled with Big Ten play over the weekend?
It's a grind. It is just a complete grind. Like there's, aside from maybe Minnesota, there's no games off. Like I don't know how you really rank teams, 2 through 12. I think you have general tiers. Obviously, like I know Rutgers is going to be, towards the top, stuff like that. But you could ask 10 people to power rank these Big Ten teams right now, and I think aside from 1, 13, and 14, they're going to give you completely different responses. Michigan State looked fine against Michigan. That was a kind of a rock fight for a while, but Michigan had won 3 in a row and they look good. And now, Rutgers, we were saying like, oh, they're a legit number 2, and then they lose to Iowa today after Iowa's looked terrible, and IU.
And all of a sudden, Iowa's looking good again.
Yeah, Iowa's got 2 in a row.
Aren't they the Jekyll and Hyde? I mean, Michigan and them are kind of fighting for who can be more Jekyll and Hyde at this point.
Yeah,
everybody is.
I just don't know. I just don't know. There's not another team in this conference that's like great. I don't think anybody's in that like upper tier across the entire country. I think there's a lot of quality teams, and that's why it's gonna be so tough. But
and it's like, yeah, I mean, you can make the argument Purdue's great, but I think they're more so consistent. Yeah, it's like their ceiling. They're not even close to their ceiling of potential. They're they're playing two freshmen that they may not reach their ceiling all year. TKR coming off the bench, he's not going to reach his ceiling playing behind Zach Edey. They certainly are going to continue to get better and better. But I think, as far as what their benchmark is, they're consistent. The rest of the Big Ten just hasn't shown that same consistency.
You must not watch Field of 68 because they said we peaked at PK. They said, well, those two freshmen are more polished, and I think they've already peaked. And that's a joke. You watch Smith as he's figured out how to manipulate defenses and what he's doing. They're obviously getting better each week. But I think it's really hard, Joe. I made a spreadsheet today because I was like, I'm going to look at this scientifically. Put net ranking in, overall record, Big Ten record, last week, KenPom, offense and defense and overall. And I looked at 2 through 12 and I said, well, none of that makes sense either.
Yeah, you can't go on resume.
I mean, Indiana and Illinois and Maryland still rank really high in those categories, and you watch them and you go, there's no way I can have any of those three teams above 7 or 8,
Yep, right.
And there's an argument to be made that Northwestern might be second right now. Look at the 4 teams they've played.
Yeah.
And the 3 teams they've beaten. They could easily be the second, like in resume up to now in the Big Ten.
Yeah, Rutgers could have been that team that was holding that second spot, handedly, and then they lose to Maryland today. So, this is going to be how this season goes. I'm sure Purdue will have their moment. It seemed like we might have it this week after the loss to Rutgers. You're like, oh, they could start stacking up here. And to Purdue's credit, to Matt Painter's credit, to the players' credit, they took that loss and took it personal, like Aidan said, especially Braden Smith, but the whole team. You got to give them credit. So, I
was looking at KenPom really quick. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Purdue, KenPom projection. Purdue is 15-5. Minnesota finishes 2-18 in conference as their projection. Everybody else, including Nebraska, projected between 8-12 and 12-8.
Yeah, and Purdue does clearly have one of the easier remaining schedules. I think that's pretty obvious. We're looking at it.
This is probably their toughest stretch
that we just did.
I said that coming into the week before we actually saw the results, and agree with what Corey's asking here. I thought just stylistically how we matched up. I still think Michigan's a tough matchup for us.
Yeah, I think they'll be tough games still.
I don't care if Michigan's 10th in the Big Ten. I think that's still going to be a tough, just stylistic matchup for us later.
Yeah, it will be. It will be.
Yeah. So
Michigan State might be, but yeah.
So Christopher ties in the chat. Game-winning shot against OSU helped the confidence of an already confident Fletcher Lawyer and the whole team, in my opinion. 44% from deep. Let's fucking go. So that's absolutely right. Where do you guys want to take this? Because we gave our instant reaction. We kind of went over some of the stats of the game. We've talked about Braden Smith. I don't know if we've given Zach Edey his proper due with a 30-point per, another double. He hit 600 rebounds for his career. He's the second fastest to 600 rebounds in Purdue's history. So I'm going to leave it to you guys. Aidan, where do you want to take this next? Give Zach Edey his due while we're here.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Edey just because I think the most impressive thing, and obviously he's, this was a game where he was going to feast. Everybody knew that coming in, but just the motor is just what impresses me. The conditioning for a guy that size, 36 minutes. It was so apparent when TKR went in there, and Miles Dredd was guarding him, and really Miles Dredd I thought was strong, with that strong base he has. There were a few times where TKR wasn't really able to do much with him, and it's just so apparent when Edey gets in there, what a dominant player he is. It's why he's going to be probably the national player of the year, Big Ten, all that stuff. And I'm so impressed by his level of conditioning to just take the beating that he does, to not foul, one foul tonight. To be an elite rim protector. I mean, he had 3 unbelievable blocks tonight. He's elite in drop coverage. He has really mastered that. And it's really one of the more impressive year-to-year improvements I've seen. And maybe that was just by virtue of Travion leaving, but man, is he good. And he showed that tonight.
Yeah. You guys want to bounce off that?
Yeah, it's almost, I was thinking about that too, because I was like, wow, Zach had whatever points and rebounds he had at the end of the night. It almost gets lost because Smith made so many of those points so easy.
Right.
That it didn't even look like Zach was working for a lot of those points.
Yeah.
Now, he still did a straight post up and, did a little right hook and made some difficult ones, but so many of them were just right at the rim lobs that that you almost you were looking at what Smith was doing to set him up more than him finishing the play. But that's a two-part dance, right? And what Zach did and continues to do. When I was watching IU earlier today, you talk about National Player of the Year. There was a piece of me that said, well, now that IU's lost Race and lost Xavier, all they're going to have now, they JHS, Jordan Huff-Shafino, was awesome today.
33 points. Yeah.
Right. But they've basically got him and Trace. So Trace is going to get fed, like force-fed, whereas, we got more options. So there was a piece of me that was like, is Trace going to score so much just because they're going to not be very good right now and his point total, rebound total is going to go up? And is that going to make it a little bit more of a race for Big Ten Player of the Year? And then Zach came out and did that tonight. And I was like, nope. No. Zach still owns this right now.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm happy to turn this into a bash Trace Jackson Davis show, but I don't think he's got the attitude of a guy that's going to, look at it in a positive way when this team had so much expectations coming into the season. Now you lose a couple guys every game they're liable to lose, and you've got a guy in Trace Jackson Davis that, in my opinion, has attitude issues at times when things aren't going his way. And then they're going to be in dogfights every night. I don't know if that's going to help him very much when it comes to production. And yeah, Jalen Hood-Shavino is certainly a talented player, 33 points, but him and Xavier Johnson really learned how to play off of each other last year. They kind of unlocked that at the end of the year. Now you don't have that, and Jalen Hood-Shavino and him are going to have to figure that out. So, Purdue, they have a system where they understand how to get him the ball, like you said. Yeah, Morris Bankston's in the chat. He's a huge supporter of what we do, and we appreciate you tuning in. Morris asks, Penn State shooting was hot in the first half. Any observations on defensive adjustments we made in the second half to clean that up? Joe, what do you think?
I think this was a huge part of the game, first of all. But I think the big thing was that first half is Edie, what I call, I think it's a pretty common term, is late switch. And so what that is like, it wasn't like, it didn't seem, at least for me, that in that first half, Edie was purposefully switching onto Pickett. It was more Morton wasn't getting through the screen well enough. Pickett was getting downhill. And so now it's a late switch because Edie kind of last seconds, okay, I have to switch onto him. And so I think that happened. Whereas the second half, Morton really got through stuff to start the half. And it just kind of mucked up the whole offensive flow, I think, for Penn State. And then with that, the rotations were better in the second half. I think there was still, you saw the one wide open dunk to Najai or whatever, because Edie doubles and then nobody rotates down low. But I think the rotations were better in the second half, whereas, they were able to kind of help double more. And that starts with Morton staying on Pickett, double more, and then kind of just close out to where they need to force contested shots. That is kind of what I saw.
Was Morton starting on Pickett in the first half? Because he was?
Yeah.
Because said something on the broadcast about Hummel said something on the broadcast that made it sound like Morton was on funk to start the game out.
No, that was wrong. They started Morton, but they just switched everything 1 through 4. So there were times where he wasn't. And then I think building off Joe's point, I think specifically getting Newman the heck off Pickett. When he came in, when he came in for Morton, Pickett just was doing whatever he wanted with Newman. I think today is a nice showcase of Morton's value to the team, because when he was on Pickett, the results were drastically different, at least in the second half. And I think the term adjustments, it happens, but I think for the most part, Painter and Purdue just executed what they really wanted to do a little bit better than they did in the first half. And I think Penn State cooled off, because at the end of the day, Jalen Pickett's a 25% 3-point shooter, as good as he looked, him going 3 for 3 in the first half. And part of that was maybe because he got Edie on him or whatever, but that was still a tough shot. He got fouled on it. And so I think kind of water found its level in that regard, and Purdue just buckled down. And like I said, they never let it get into up and down transition game where Funk and Dredd and Winter are sprinting to those corners and Pickett's getting a paint touch and just spraying the ball out. They never really let it get to that point. And every time that did happen, you just see Braden walking it up. Let's get into a set. Let's slow this game down as much as we can. And it just made Penn State uncomfortable, I think. And Purdue just has so much more talent. It's unbelievable. And that ball screen, as Kraig said, is just so hard to guard that it just
there was 62 possessions in this game per KenPom, and that was Penn State's lowest total on the year.
So, and you could tell Purdue really just ground them
Braden
to a
Smith
hole.
legit just walked up the ball.
And Funk finished with 3 points total tonight.
Yeah, on that bomb, on that crazy shot.
That deep one.
Yeah. They never let him get into the game, and he's kind of, a lot of times you talk about where your stars are going to get points, but where else are they coming from? And that, to me, they just never really let him get into the game in this one. I did think Newman was a lot better defensively in the second half, though. A lot of those turnovers started with him getting a piece of the ball.
He was active. His hands were active. Yeah.
I'm glad he was, because when he took that three in the corner, I started yelling things. I'm like, it was right when they were getting all the momentum, and he took a quick shot in the corner. I was like, if it goes in, I don't say anything, but then it doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't go in, and then I'm an expert. So, as Sam Watkins says, Coach Shrewsbury said in his interview that the difference between first and second half was the refs and not being consistent. Kraig, do you agree with that?
Give me a second. I'm going to the halftime splits on this. Let somebody else talk.
Yeah, I would say that I'll say this. I felt bad that it had to be this was their big game at the Palestra, and of course we all love Shrews, and it had to be Purdue, and we just dismantled them, and really we got Shrews pretty mad in the second half.
He took a tech.
I got a tech, and I sat next to him at an AAU tournament, Shrewsbury, a couple of months ago. He's a fiery guy. He yells quite a bit. I'll say that. He is a loud guy, even at his son's AAU tournaments. So I to kind of see him melt down, I was like, oh man, that's tough, because you almost wish it was IU in their big showcase game, since I'm usually someone who roots for Shrewsbury. But go ahead, Kraig.
Well, that's who they play next, right? Penn State plays IU next, so he can get angry. He can take it out on them.
The first half, the second half, we were called for one more foul in the first half. Half. And I didn't. There was nothing that. We got more aggressive in the second half, but it's not like we all of a sudden started playing, Houston, Louisville, foul every play defense,
And I'm not sure what his tech was for, because it was a goaltend, and then they didn't do a great job on the broadcast, I didn't think, but
they just circled Shrews and the ref, and they were like, there was a tech.
Yeah, I don't think they knew either. It looked like one of those that maybe built up over 3 or 4 plays and then kind of culminated.
We don't know what came out of Shrew's mouth.
Couldn't really pinpoint it, but you will never hear me say a bad word towards Shrewsbury. I think he's awesome.
Oh no, I love him.
He's so good.
I love him.
I root for Penn. Anytime Penn State's not playing us, I root for them to do well. And there was a piece of me that even thought, man, I'd have been okay if this game was a little closer, for their sake. But
exactly.
I felt a lot more comfortable that it wasn't.
Yeah, because it was so clear who the better team was. And I'll say this. I will say, the whole thing about giving Shrews all this credit, and like I said, I love him, but giving him all this credit for, choosing to play the game at the Palestra. Who wouldn't if their home arena was the Bryce Jordan? Nobody goes to those games, especially over break.
Right.
Okay, I do have to speak to this, though.
Yeah, do it.
I am really angry that this is a quad 2 win. I'm pissed about this. This would be this is going to matter. Potentially, when we get to March Madness and we get to seeding, it's going to matter how many quad 1 wins we have. And this is going to be treated as a quad 2 win because they're calling it a neutral game. And I heard the Big Ten was going to petition or something to change it because all the tickets were controlled by Penn State. But right now, they're treating it as a neutral game. And, man, I love all the good feels of this and everything. But at the end of the day, that's a notch that's not on the resume now.
Okay. I got a thing with quad 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it one? Because maybe I just don't understand it well enough. Is it used like for seeding purposes in March Madness, or is it just more like a stat people reference right now? Does anybody know?
I mean, it directly influences your net ranking.
And it's specifically like quad 1, like there's the hard cutoffs.
Yeah, if you go to net rankings, there's hard. So a neutral game, they have to be top 50 for it to be quad 1. An away game, they only have to be top 75.
So if Penn State gets to 51, it's a quad 2. Yeah. And if they're 50, it's quad 1. And does anybody, like, do people high up in the NCAA not see that as an issue? Like,
I don't know. They said they reference it. Like the selection committee has talked about referencing it. They'll never say like we only use this, we only use that. There's many data points, but it is something. Sure.
If it's used, it doesn't make sense to me to have this hard cutoff. Like, what's the difference between the 50th and the 51st best team?
Nothing.
Now, if it's just something that's referenced like kind of as an organizational stat and not really used with seeding and that, cool. I'm cool with that then. But if it's actually used, like, why isn't it? And I'm not expecting you guys to know, but why isn't it like you get like a certain, almost like a tiered point system? Like, you get this amount of points for beating the number 1 team away, and then it like is this steady drop off instead of this like hard cutoff. It just doesn't make sense because I don't think there's, even looking at the Big Ten, it's not like there's a big difference between teams 7 and 8. Like, there's not going to be a difference between 50 and 51.
No, there's not.
Not like questioning you guys, more just getting that off my chest because I think it's kind of dumb.
Well, we're good friends with Brian Tonsoni, who, along with Assembly Call, being a host of Assembly Call, a popular IU basketball podcast, but he also runs Delphi Bracketology, where they break down who they believe is going to be in the tournament. And just the other day, I think it was yesterday, he put out Purdue still stands as a 1 seed as of right now. I know, no shocker there, but maybe as we get to the end of the season, we do one of these post-game shows. We'll bring him on as we get closer to Selection Sunday and have a conversation with him just about this and get some clarity on it, because there is nobody in the business that does it as good as Brian Tonsoni when it comes to breaking down the bracket. So we saw, Chris is saying in the chat, Chris Root is saying in the chat, speaking of officiating, did Purdue finally cover the spread in a Courtney Green game? Did this get overlooked? I didn't see anybody bringing this up yet. That's interesting.
Yes, it did. We did, because I think it was 5, as Alex Rockhold says. And obviously we easily covered that. Yeah, Courtney Green's brutal. I think he just gets caught up in the moment. I really think he's one of those guys who loves to, like, oh, this team's on a 7-0 run, so they're going to get the charge call, or, that kind of thing. And I think he kind of lost the game against IU Iowa. But if we could go back up to one of Alex Rockhold's comments about Painter using his second timeout there in the second half, I thought that's a great observation, because it was a point where they were going on a little bit of a mini run, as he said, and it's just good coaching, right? Like, and then he's able to get Zach Edey back in as well, and to get him the additional rest of the timeout. So I thought that was a great timeout by Painter, when a lot of coaches I don't think would have thought to use it there, because you're obviously in control. But Penn State, it's kind of like they're showing some signs of life, and let's just extinguish that with this timeout. Let's bring the big fella back in, and let's just put this thing to bed. So I think that's a great observation, because he really, I don't think that's a timeout a lot of coaches would think to pull there.
What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, no, I pretty much everything that Aidan said. I think Painter's just been on it this year. I mean, well, maybe it's a little early, but like at some point we will have to have the conversation about Painter as the National Coach of the Year.
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah, and by the way, speaking of the field 68, every single big job that comes open, those guys say Painter. Like Kentucky, they said their first call would be Painter. Texas, if those jobs were to open, they would call Painter. So hopefully,
I mean, if I'd had, I would call Painter. I would assume he'll be like either wouldn't answer or be like no. But
hopefully,
sure, I would call him first. Why not?
Yeah, right.
From what I hear from the people that know him well, he's not going to leave Purdue, that he is completely content, in a good place where he is, makes good money, has a good life, grills his, or he smokes his brisket in the backyard, and, You know, he lives the dream. You know, I think he's got a lake house or something too. And, you know, I don't think he has any interest to move down to Texas and start over when he's put 18 years or whatever he has now into this program and now built it to where it is.
It's just a machine now.
Yeah. It's a machine. I mean, you're talking about, I mean, Camden Hyde is redshirted. William Berg redshirted. You've got Miles Colvin coming in next year. You've got Kanan Catchings. Yeah. I mean, he's putting up big time points. Joe, you saw Catchings over the weekend.
Colvin.
Why don't you talk about some of your observations when you saw that? I know you were putting some stuff on Twitter. Why don't you tell the viewers some of your observations? Is it Kanan Catching or it's Kanan Catchings?
It's Cannon. He saw Colvin over the weekend.
I saw Colvin. Yeah.
I'll get it right once he gets here. But so why don't you tell us what you thought of that of his play over the weekend?
I saw Colvin.
You saw Colvin. I apologize,
but I can still talk about him.
I forget.
Colvin's
Go ahead.
Colvin's. I think people are going to compare him to Ivy, like coming in, and I don't think that's fair. Colvin has elite athleticism, similar to Ivy. I think it's a little more controlled. Ivy's just so explosive. Besides that, Colvin was really good. I called it a really, really good game. He had 32, I believe, went like 6 for 10 from 3. And had so much defensive attention that it didn't really matter. What impressed me and what I think he'll like really fit into Purdue is he's just another movement shooter. He came, I think he hit 6 threes, and I would say 4 of them were coming off of, that like baseline triple screen that Purdue loves to run for like Lawyer or Newman, or coming off a stagger screen. And then he had 1 or 2 pull-ups. He looked really comfortable getting to his mid-range game. And then he also a couple late game kind of just full court dunks where he just, kind of broke away and his head was basically at the rim. Had 1 dunk where it was just almost like a drop step and just 2 hands, super easy. So like the athleticism's elite. I was really, really impressed by the movement shooting. I think he's in a spot where he can kind of just do what he wants. And so I think on the defensive end, he can pretty much just gamble for steals right now. But that's not going to fly with Painter. So I think he has the physical tools to become a good defender. I don't think he's there right now. I think a lot of it's just more of the, buying into a defensive scheme. But like I said, he's a top 70 recruit, 60 recruit playing at his local high school. Like he's going to get to do what he wants. But yeah, overall, just super, super impressed. It was fun. Like, it wasn't a super big gym, but like every time he shot, you could just feel the anticipation in the air. He has a pretty high arcing shot. He rose up over anybody. Like, they were starting to double team him on the catch. It didn't really matter. Just 1 dribble pull up, and he's 6'5", really high jumper. Like nobody was touching him at all. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed watching. Plan on getting out to hopefully 1 or 2 more before he's done this year.
100%. Like I said, the future is bright. And when it comes to Matt Painter, thinking about other programs, I think he's just fine where he's at with the number 1 team in the nation. They are still the number 1 team in the nation until tomorrow morning. So we will continue to call them that as such. Matt Painter agrees with that, this death stare. That's what it was like when I had to ask Matt, when I finally stepped up to the mic and was like, all right, I'm going to ask a question today. It's been 3 years. I've been patient and I've been quiet. I'm going to ask my question. And then that's the look he gave me as I was asking the question. And I was just completely terrified. I mean, that's just his natural look. It wasn't like he was glaring at me. He was just like, okay, let's hear you. He's just very intense looking. It's like a velociraptor almost. So it's a little terrifying. You can only imagine playing.
You just missed a golden opportunity to be like legendary in that moment, though. Had you started with, Joe from Rensselaer, and then went into your question.
Brian from Rensselaer.
Brian. Yeah, Joe was the tailgater.
Yes. So, we don't necessarily have to go an hour and a half tonight, but, we've touched on some different people here tonight. Obviously pretty easy to know who the bread and butter. I mean, Caleb First, 7 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 20 minutes of play. Is there any thoughts you had on him or anybody else that of the people we haven't covered?
I thought Fletcher's 17 was like a little bit quiet. Like I guess I didn't realize until I kind of monitor the box scores you go through. And obviously he got heated up a little bit in the second half, but I thought he was maybe at 9-10 points, something like that. When I checked the final box score and realized he was at 17, I was like, oh, okay. Because it kind of came in different little spurts throughout the game. Sometimes for him it comes in runs. But it was kind of, just throughout the whole game here and there along the way. And I thought he obviously was key because, again, as Aidan said, when he's dragging behind that pick and roll, if he's hitting, nobody can really slide off him.
Yeah, I was looking. He only had 3 points in the first half, and then he had 14 in the second.
So just like the Ohio State game.
Yeah, the big one for me. And I mean, I guess it didn't carry over in the first half per se, but his very first shot, a lot of times if you watch, his very first shot is like it's off like a stagger screen where he's cutting to like the middle of the top of the key and he's like slightly off balance, but not enough to say it's a bad shot. And he hasn't been hitting those at all. And it's been pretty consistent that that's been his first shot. He drilled it today. And then that was when I kind of was like, okay, things are going to be good for him. So, but yeah, then 14 in the second half, 5 of 8 shooting, 3 of 4 from 3. He was a plus minus. He was a plus 22 in the second half alone. So,
how about this one? I'm pretty sure he made this shot.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
he did.
He's got great touch around the rim. Couple floaters he made today. The one where he was the last guy through on the fast break, and I thought he might throw it to Edie. He just pulled a floater.
I thought it was a lob, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was too for a second. That one, obviously, that we got up. Talking about Morris Banks, and he put up about Caleb First, and I thought he had a nice game. This was a game where you kind of wonder what are they gonna do with him defensively? Can he be able to hang with a guy like Seth Lundy or Miles Dredd or whoever he has to guard for Penn State? I thought he held up admirably. It's really nice to have him out there as a help side guy when you're facing a team this small. And I think he just had a solid game. He really knows what to do. I thought he gave us a bit of an edge as he usually does on the offensive glass. That last one was just textbook cutting to the rim off the ED post up, right, as Purdue has their 4-man do, every time. It's a rule for them. And the other thing I thought like they were talking about Shrewsbury trying to get ED running around the perimeter. And I just thought Purdue did a great job not letting that happen. And then on the other end, I thought Purdue showed some new looks that I hadn't necessarily seen, where it was almost a 5-out where they let Edie come up almost to the perimeter. And there was one possession where he set a ball screen for Lawyer on an empty side, and then they iced it, meaning forcing it to the baseline. Edie popped out. He just threw it right back to Edie, and then Edie immediately reversed it into another action for Braden on the weak side, or on the far side. And I think there's something to that because Edie's mobile and he's probably the best roll man in the country. So if you can get a ball screen on one side, and then if that doesn't work, immediately flow it into another action. Like as a coach, we talk all the time about, can we string 2 or 3 good actions together, handoff into a ball screen, into a down screen, stuff that obviously Painter does at an elite level. So I think maybe look for that in future games. Edie becoming more of Edie popping out into a 5-out look and then rolling hard to the rim and taking up all that gravity that he does.
I know Greg and I broke that play down exactly like you did as we watched it.
I'm delirious after everything that happened with my Bears today. I can barely see straight watching that second half. So I'm glad that Purdue didn't make it that interesting of a finish, because I don't think my heart could take it.
When you say that that's a rule for that 4-man to cut, can you just break that down a little bit more, what you're saying there?
Yeah, so what Purdue does is it's called a weak side dive. When they get a paint touch with Edie, if it's on a block, right, a lot of times they'll get paint touches in the middle of the floor. And if they get him to duck in right underneath the rim in the middle of the floor, like on this clip here, or not on this clip, that's a good one of the dive, but if they get it to him on the middle of the floor, it's hard to help, right? And if you get it to him on a block, what you want to do is send your 4-man Gillis or First on a cut to the rim on the weak side. And so now Edie has an option to drop it off, kind of as he's looking. And they just, First is so good at that because he's big, he's strong, he's fast. Gillis isn't quite as good. When they have Gillis in there, they'd prefer to go have Gillis in that corner because he's such a good shooter. But I think that Painter, I've been to a few practices, and Painter has described that as a rule for their offense. So I think it's pretty effective when they do it.
I was really
Yeah,
hoping that was going to be a clip that lined up with what you were talking
It kind of did.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, I got this. And you showed it. And Aiden's like, no, that's not
My
it
highlight
at all.
was Edie drop off to first. And
That's
then,
nice. That's nice too. We'll take that.
Yeah.
It's in the similar vein. I was just going to say that.
Greg, it just goes to show that, like, actually being in the profession means something. I guess, so.
Yes. Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to quickly kind of plug myself. When I did a couple of video voiceovers on Twitter, and the game winner Lawyers game winner from against Ohio State, it was the same action. Gillis dove. He was at the top of the key. As soon as Edie catches it in the post, he dives opposite block, and it took his defender with him. And so then once the Lawyers man doubled from 2 feet away, it just created so much space for Lawyers to get his shot off. So that was all I was going to add there. It's tough to do, because then if you don't stay with Gillis, Edie's going to find him every time.
Yeah, and talking about Purdue as a machine, Purdue's program as a machine, I think they do a great job of having defined rules. If you can have that as a program, as a team, it's great for your players because they know exactly where to go. Like, for example, defensively, I'm sure you guys know that, on the catch in the post, defensively, we go to double with the 4-man, right? And that's a Painter staple. Some people would say that's putting us in rotation, and that's not good. But Painter believes it will force bad decisions, and that's a defensive rule for Purdue. And I think Painter really believes if you stick to your rules, the outcome's going to be a positive one more often than not. So
how hard do you think it is? And he talked about this last year with Jaden, or maybe it was Jaden's freshman year, because even like Hummel, Raphael, like a lot of guys around the country were like, put Jaden in pick and roll, we weren't doing it. And then they did it more the sophomore year. How hard do you think it is for Painter to just let Smith go in that high ball screen action, pick and roll action, and say, kind of go out there and freelance a little bit? Because it seems like it took him a minute to get to the point where he was comfortable with Jaden, and now it's spilled over into Braden, and we see it more and more.
Yeah, I think pretty hard for Painter. I think he's talked about. I think his natural inclination is to not run ball screen action. It's everybody's doing it. It's spread pick and roll, right? That's modern basketball. And I actually think Coach Painter takes a certain satisfaction in not doing it. That's just an assumption on my part, but I think he likes that he can run all this elaborate action and get great shots out of it. And I think I would too if I could do that. But having someone like Braden or Jaden, and I'll be honest, I think he trusts Braden in the pick and roll more than he does Jaden.
Agreed.
For good reason, because Braden is a natural passer, whereas Jaden, I think, Jaden struggled in that in-between game in the mid-range and against drop coverage. It's like, do I take the floater? Do I take the mid-range pull-up? He's improved on that now with the Pistons a little bit.
You could just see that in the last game for Jaden, where you could see like now he's starting to get like, hey, I can let this ball go, and they're in transition, and he drops it off a few times. Jaden last year probably was like, I'm taking this thing.
Yeah, I'm going to dunk on somebody, and I don't blame him. I mean, and that's the thing, like all the critics of Jaden, like, okay, but what would you do if you had that kind of vertical and that kind of speed coming downhill off of a ball screen? Would you try to go put somebody on a poster? Yeah, exactly.
There's no critics here of Jaden Ivey's on this show. I might have criticized the guy.
No, and I get it, but at the same time, like, it isn't 2K. Like, for coaches, it isn't like a video game. There's still players, there's still humans, and the natural inclination when you're like Jaden Ivey is to go put somebody on a poster. And the natural inclination for Braden Smith, being 5'10" and undersized his whole life, is to put up a floater or hit a guy in the corner on a skip pass. Like the Marquette game, those floaters that Braden hit off ball screen action. Jaden just didn't want to do that, and that's okay. He had other strengths that Braden didn't. But I think is it fair to say he's one of the elite ball screen players in the country right now already? I mean,
it's got to be up there. Yeah. And I think, if we're kind of touching on Painter's, I don't know if you want to call it stubbornness or whatever, he has his system. last year you have a prime candidate to run a ton of pick and rolls, and now this year you have a 5'11" undersized freshman. Just kind of sticking it to like, okay, yeah, I could have run ball screens with the All-American, but I'm actually just going to run him with his freshman point guard now, and we're going to have a great success with that too. So
yeah.
I don't know if that's any accurate or not, but
But they ran a higher percentage of it last year than Painter ever had. I saw some stat that it was a marked uptick from what they ever had last year. So it just kind of amuses me now that now he's like, so when we need to take control of the game, I'm just gonna release the little 5'11", 6 foot, 5'10", whatever we want to call him. I'm just gonna put him in ball screen, let him go to town, and we're gonna blow up a lead by 10 points.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I also wanted to share this along. This came from Kathy and Jerry Miller. We've talked a lot about Fletcher Lawyer tonight, but he was the big hero against Ohio State. And when we're not there, I get a lot of FOMO when we're not in the stands because then we can't capture these amazing highlights on our own. But luckily, Kathy and Jerry Miller did find the highlight of the game-winning shot while they were in the stands at Ohio State. So I want to share that along with you guys. It's a beautiful thing. Here it is. And the timeout is called. What a play. What a shot. Thank you, Kathy and Jerry Miller, for sharing that along on Facebook. Reached out to her and she said we were more than welcome to use it. She said Jerry was the one that actually captured it. So props to Jerry for capturing the moment. Sometimes people get scared. They don't want to jinx it, pull their phone out. And she did a great job of keeping the camera rolling after the shot. Because the shot is great. We all see that on TV, but the reactions of the crowd and the team on the sidelines, that's the good stuff there that you don't always get to see on TV. So shout out to Kathy and Jerry Miller. Sean Stevenson says in the chat that should have been a quad one win if it's a home game for Penn State. Should be. They controlled the ticket sales, as Kraig pointed out. That would be 6 for Purdue. Houston has 2. They should stay first. Better resume than anybody. And Kevin Pass says
better than Houston. I don't know if we can say better than Kansas at this point now. So
their only losses to Tennessee.
Okay, well, screw Kansas. And and Kevin Pass says we had the game winner with too much on the clock on Monday. We lost by 1. We should stay number 1, but who cares really? We got a peak in April, though it's nice to swing big as number 1. And I completely agree. That's, we're past the obsession of being number 1. If we get back there, that's great. If the Boilers can get back there, I say we here as we are fans of this team as well as the coverage we bring. But yeah, you want to peak in April. You also want to peak in March because it'd be nice to add to that most Big Ten titles in Big Ten conference history. And, there's plenty of goals to still ascertain beyond that number 1 ranking, which they've already gotten twice here in the last 2 years. So completely.
I'd just be happy to get to April. Like if we get to April, then we peaked, right? So we get to April, but I'm gonna be happy.
And if they can get that 1 seed, they're gonna have a real shot of making their pathway a little easier than maybe last year when they're the 4 seed, even though things kind of laid out for them nicely. But we will never speak of last year, 3 seed. I'm sorry, but that's what I mean. We're just never gonna speak of what happened in the tournament last year ever again, unless you want me to throw a complete shit fit on the show. So Christopher Ty says, if we lose it, we will return this season as far as the number 1 seed. And that's, that's fine. I don't necessarily disagree, although Houston's schedule, you don't see very many L's on there, but at the same time, when you're going through the grind of a season, besides the conference that Gonzaga's in, even though they've been tested here enough times this year, when you're going through the grind of your conference play, typically you'll run into a team that you're underestimating at some point or another. So
And
not out of the realm of possibility that one of these teams go down.
Memphis did beat them twice last year, and a lot of those guys are back for Memphis. So
yeah, they don't see him
there's a
until
chance.
February 19th, unfortunately. But
I think the other thing
it can be my Valentine's Day present, Aidan.
There you go. I think the other thing I have an issue with like the AP poll and that is like there's no set what we're voting on. Like I was watching.
Here comes the statistics guy.
Well, no, I was just gonna say no, not even that. I think it was Seth Davis. I forget whoever's doing the halftime show for one of the ESPN games. I think it was the Maryland Ohio State game. They picked their top 5 teams, right? Like what they would pick top 5 teams. Has Purdue 5, cool, and then has I think Kansas 1 and Houston 2. The reason Purdue was 5 was because freshman guards haven't proven like entirely like need more from them.
Right.
The reason Houston's number 2 compared to number 1 is they don't have a good enough resume. So now which is it? Are we projecting freshman guards going forward, or are we looking at resumes? Are we combining?
Arbitrary.
Like there's no, like in my when I heard that, it's like, okay, can you put Houston number 2 because of resume, but then say Purdue's number 5 because you're going to project forward? Like, is that fair to rank that way? And that's my whole thing.
And I think most AP voters vote on resume.
Okay.
Personally, I do primarily think that's true. I think there are some that project, but because if not, there was a stretch there where UConn, just eye test, UConn looked way better than us, right?
Oh, yeah.
For a stretch of a week or two, but that didn't move the poll because the resume was still there for Purdue. So I think that happens, but I think resume generally wins out the AP poll.
Okay.
Personally, unless you're Douster, but.
So we have about 50 people in the YouTube chat. We got people watching from across 3 platforms, from Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. For the people on YouTube specifically, like I said, we got about 50 people in the live chat on YouTube. I would sincerely appreciate it. We all would here. If you'd hit that like button while you're watching it now or on your way out, that's going to be something that helps grow this, where we can get more people in the live chat, where we can have good discussion. You guys bring a lot to the table when it comes to that chat, because you might point out some things we haven't talked about, or a question you have, or a thought you have that's going to help bring the quality of this show up. So we appreciate everybody's contribution, whether it's people in the chat interacting, or even if you're just watching at home, and not doing the interaction. We appreciate the support in any way you provide it, but that like button will go a long way in helping us grow on YouTube, because that just kind of sends it through that algorithm, and then the other Purdue fans out there can find us and know the kind of work we do. Before we get to like final plugs or anything, is there anything we've missed here tonight? I'm about the day I've been through with the Bears, and now this Purdue game. Like I might pass out. So if there's,
I don't even watch the NFL. I don't know if you won.
And
or
if
lost,
there's any Colts
really
I know a lot of Purdue fans are Colt fans. I just want to tell you guys how much you mean to me. Thank you so much. You beat us in the Super Bowl. You broke my little Greg heart years ago, but today you really made up for it in a lot of ways by allowing the Texans to win on a Hail Mary touchdown and then a 2-point conversion. It was literally a miracle. All the hardships we've been through as Bears fans this year, for you to let us get the number 1 pick with your theatrics at the end of the game as the Lions go running into the end zone for a touchdown, but there's a flag on the field. Nobody cares about football. We're talking about basketball. But regardless, thank you to the Colt fans that are watching. We appreciate, as Bears fans, your contribution to helping us get to the number 1 spot. And hey, maybe come draft time, we'll let you trade up to the number 1 spot, and you can take the quarterback of your choice and beat the Texans face in and year out with CJ Stroud or whoever you want. Aidan, any final thoughts here on the game as we wrap things up here tonight?
Yeah, I just think, I don't know. I think we've talked about it a little bit already, but I just think Braden Smith, when he's going like this, it's very, very tough for Purdue to be beat. I think by certainly anyone in the Big Ten and probably most teams in the country. Edey's such a constant in the middle, and tonight I think Braden and Fletch going like they did. I think tonight just kind of showed you you only need so much around Edey. You just need guys who can get him the ball, as Braden can so expertly, and then you just need enough contributions from everybody else. Ohio State, it was Jenkins. He had 9 points, hit some bailout shots. He was a non-factor tonight. TKR, Newman, they didn't do anything tonight, but you got more than maybe you usually would expect from some of the freshmen. And I think Braden Smith's here. I think he's a top guard, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. I don't know where I'd rank him or whatever, but I just think the way he operates in pick and roll, and just the poise he has to not rush, to not get sped up into taking bad shots. And I think it's rare for a freshman. And I think having him I know somebody said earlier, he's a one and done guy. I mean, the NBA frowns upon guys his height, and but I think he's going to be here a while, and I think he's a hell of a player to have in our corner.
Yeah, I mean, for him to go toe to toe with a potential lottery pick at Ohio State, very talented guard and Sensabaugh they have there, and then to go toe to toe with Pickett tonight here at Penn State, 2 straight road games where Braden Smith doesn't flinch, and as we pointed out a few times here on the show, after Matt Painter challenged him after the loss against Rutgers, 15 games into his career, and this is what he's already up to. So the hype is real when it comes to Braden Smith. There was a lot of groundswell hype coming into the season of people that got to watch their practices and didn't know what to expect. He's the only true point guard on the roster. What are they going to do? Well, he's doing it. He's showing it, and it's a lot of fun. And to think of what he's going to be capable of for the years to come, going to be a lot of fun to watch. Joe, why don't you go ahead and give us your final thoughts and then tell people where they can find you and how they can follow you and the coverage and content you bring to the table.
Yeah, so just kind of final thoughts. One that I think just quick, first only played 6 minutes in the first half. He got into foul trouble, and then he played 14 in the second half. And like Aidan kind of said earlier, having that secondary rim protector is just big. So not as, maybe not as much this game, but for teams that are really going to pound it inside, like having First at 6'11" who can move well. Edey comes over to double. Now First is the rim protector. Like that's going to be big. But yeah, just kind of to jump off Aidan's points too. Like Braden Smith, he's just him. Like he's built for this. I think 11 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, something like, or 7 assists, 6 rebounds. One of the I think it's fair to say he's one of the best point guards in the league right now. One of the best guards in the conference. And it is obviously a big dominated league, but he's still he's going to be good. He's going to continue to only get better, get even just more and more confident and make more and more plays. And Edey's going to become a huge beneficiary of that too. Even more so. I think I looked up the stats. Edey was 7 of 8 on pick and rolls today, like where he got the ball from rolling, 14 points. So just insane numbers all around. Really good effort in that second half to come back after, in the first half that they didn't let get away, which was good. Penn State was on a roll, knocking down shots as they do. But Purdue just kind of stuck with it. And I think that just shows what this team is. Just a team that's going to stick around, and then they're going to have their run. So, but yeah, for finding me, you can find me on Twitter at Joe_Jackson2210. I will have a film breakdown tomorrow, a film thread on Twitter where I go through, I don't know, it's usually like 30, 40 plays, kind of break down what I see. And then I also do a couple like specific plays where I'll do a voiceover, really, dive into a specific play more in depth. Then you can also, me and Aidan do a podcast called Feed the Post. We are going to be recording one tomorrow, and it will be out either tomorrow night or Tuesday morning. Plan is to do 2 a week. We're going to do one Purdue, one Big Ten. So tomorrow's is going to be a Purdue-centric podcast, and then Thursday, Friday, sometime in that area, we'll be looking to have more of a Big Ten-centric podcast.
And you mentioned where you can find that podcast, right?
Feed the Post on Apple, Google, and Spotify, and then the Twitter is Feed the Post _.
Okay, just making sure, because I was trying to say that earlier, and I just said where you can find all your podcasts, because that's just my lazy way of just saying that, because I can't remember which ones they're available on. You go find it. It's great. It's worth trying to find, but just listen to what Joe just said, and then you don't have to try to find it, because it'll be right there for you. Some great basketball analysis from both you gentlemen, and I really appreciate you guys being a part of this. done 2 of these now, and I think the people tuning in are really enjoying what we're bringing to the table, and we'll continue to do this for the road games, home games. For the most part, we're there. Kraig and I, and Joe is there. Aidan's there at times. He's got, he also coaches basketball, so he's going to be in and out depending on his schedule availability, but we're going to do as much of these as we can, especially on the road. And then for home games, Joe and Aidan hold spaces on Twitter. So if you want to continue to have these conversations for home games and you're not getting your fix, having these kind of conversations, get on Twitter. I know it's a cesspool on there. It's a hellscape, but if you just go on there and follow us and nobody else, then you won't have to worry about the politics and all the bullshit. You can just hear some good basketball conversation being had, and they hold what they call a spaces on Twitter, and it's basically just a platform where you can just have audio conversation where you can't see us, but you can hear us. So, and you could get your thoughts and questions in a little easier than you can here on a live stream like what we're doing here. So, Kraig, final thoughts and remarks, my fine gentleman and co-host.
I would encourage you all to join the spaces. That's a place where you can listen to us without seeing all of our ugly faces, but still hear the good analysis that comes through. Joe, I'm a little bit. It's 9:20, Joe. You got plenty of time to get that thread out tonight. I'm waiting for it. I need to see it. Let's get dedicated, okay?
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I know.
Last couple of things. I would say, I got to give some love to Pickett. I know we talked about him briefly right at the beginning, but just as a Big Ten fan, that dude is a stud, and he has a YMCA game, and he can score at all 3 levels. He posted up Zach Edey. He's 6'2", and posted up Zach Edey at 7'4" today. That dude's game is just incredible. So as a Purdue fan, just looking in and admiring somebody else's game, just really, really love that and what he's done. Jeff in the chat, Krags, asked about top 5 in the Big Ten. I'm going to put out my power rankings tomorrow, but what I will tell you is I've got Purdue number 1, MSU, OSU, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Penn State, Northwestern Michigan, and Iowa 2 through 5. If you follow along with that, and then I have Illinois, IU, Maryland, Nebraska, and Minnesota 10 through 14. So I have 8 teams at 2 through 5, and that's about the best that I can do right now. A good friend of mine texted me and said, "Hey, when you were talking about that 3-game stretch here, don't forget about that 4-game stretch to end the season. We play IU, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Ohio State those last 4 games."
Oh, that's true.
And Wisconsin is away, which is always tough. So my challenge here, guys, I've got a connection, a really good friend who worked for Purdue Athletics, who now works for Wisconsin Athletics. Yes, she traded out there, I guess. Traded down, I should say. But if that game matters for the Big Ten championship, I think all 4 of us need to take a Brags in the Stands road trip, Greg, and go up to the Kohl Center, which is absolutely insane when I went there last year, and do a little bit of live coverage, Greg.
Absolutely. I mean, I was there last year as the confetti fell and Wisconsin beat Purdue in a very dramatic finish. And the Wisconsin fan base stormed the court. The student section stormed the court. Barstool Big Cat has his shirt completely off and his chest and his big beer belly. I got one too, completely painted. So if it comes down to it, we will avenge that terrible loss and heartache that I had to suffer. It's a great college town. I was only there briefly, but you could tell that even though it's up in upper Wisconsin, which nobody ever wants to be in.
Dude, that is not upper Wisconsin.
Wherever it is, it took forever to drive up there. That's what I mean by
it's like 2 hours from your house.
It took 4 hours to get there. Literally every college from my house is 4 hours away, except for Purdue. Thank God for that. So, we appreciate it. And make sure Kraig, is a administrator and founder of Boiler Diehards. If you're not familiar, it's a Facebook group for Purdue fans only. It's a private group, so there's not a bunch of bullshit going on as far as people coming in there and trolling, and they talk football and basketball and recruiting and everything else. and it's a really good conversation. They have 10,000 members to that group. So if you want to be one of those members, just go ahead and join. Kraig will vet you through and you'll be able to get in. Again, thank you to everybody to tuning in. Morris Bankson, that's right. Bear down, number one pick. The Bears are on the clock. Michael Van Meter, thank you for tuning in for this whole show. You've been very interactive in the chat, and we really appreciate that, Michael. Boiler up for sure. Justin Inman says, hitting that like button is so easy. It's like an Edie dunk. You're absolutely right when it comes to that. Once again, when I said that, it seems like a bunch of people did hit the like button and heard my plea. So we appreciate you, you helping us out. And he's right. And I'll give you an example of just how easy an Edie dunk is right here, Justin Inman. And this is what it's like, if you this is what it's like to hit the like button right there. Slam it home all day. He got called for a bullshit charge.
That was a charge.
It's a dunk, and he shouldn't have got called for the damn charge. I don't care if they didn't count it. We counted here at Brags in the Stands. So, but thank you to everybody for tuning in. A little teaser for those of you still hanging out here. Of course, watch and listen to Feed the Post this week. They're going to have some good Big Ten and Purdue coverage. Kraig and I have a show planned for some point this week. I'm not going to give away the guest yet, but let's just tell you it's a very special guest and potential special guest. And I'll give you the hint. He does play for the team. So we'll see.
And he might have had some big-time defensive plays recently.
He makes plays. So we'll see if we can get the schedules right, but that's the teaser for those of you that stuck around for this hour-and-a-half show and got to the end with us. Make sure you stay tuned for announcements regarding our schedule because it's just kind of free-flowing and we make the schedule work for our guests and have a lot of fun guests planned as the season rolls on. We'll continue to roll on. Next game is a home game, so we will be at the stadium, so no live show. I think we play Nebraska next on Friday, correct?
I was going to ask, who do we even play?
Is it Friday or Thursday?
Friday.
I haven't looked past Penn State.
Friday night against Nebraska. Hey, and the Nebraska game was not an easy one at Nebraska. So, no days off in the Big Ten. They get a little break after 3 games in 7 days. Now they only play 1 game next week. So, it'll be really interesting, but again, we will not be going live after the show because we'll all be at the game covering it from there. So,
are they going to have their spaces?
Yep.
And Joe and Aidan will have their spaces, whether they like it or not, because I need it. Because then when I'm driving home from West Lafayette to the region, that's where I get to fill that's my space filler. When I call people, sometimes when I'm on the road and I call someone, they're like, you're just calling me because you're trying to use up time while you're driving. You're using me. I'm like, yes, I am. So that's what I do with the spaces.
Yeah, too. Friday night, I will be coaching in Rensselaer of all places.
Oh, be careful, Brian.
Brian might be there.
Find Brian.
Yeah,
so I'll be. Brian.
Well, he might have some suggestions for you.
I'd say I might get heckled. Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you, Brian is very against chanting while your team is shooting free throws. So I know Brian will be in the stands, tackling, high school kids if they're breaking that rule. So watch out for Brian from Rensselaer. He's an intense one. So thank you to all for tuning in once again. Thank you to Aidan, Joe, Kraig, Bowers, my trusty co-host. Thank you to all. This is Brags in the Stands. We'll see you here soon. Stay tuned for updates of upcoming shows. And always, Boiler up.